Hey guys, welcome to the Property Podcast panel. We got myself, Jalen Hardcastle, with Josh Story here, and we want to thank you guys for tuning in for episode 1 of CMA and Determining Value. We're going to start off telling you a little bit about what to expect from the podcast, as well as a little bit about ourselves, and then we'll kind of dive into today's episode. Tell them about yourself, Josh.
So I started in real estate about 3 years ago, obviously with Cedar Hill Properties. That's where I've been since I've started. I have a lot of friends and family that are in investing, owning rentals and flips. So I've kind of been around it for a while. I really like Cedar Hill and the people here. There's a lot to learn, and they've taught me a lot. But yeah, I really enjoy it so far, and I'm hoping to keep progressing my career and stay with Cedar Hill.
I like the sounds of that. Obviously, you know, Cedar Hill's close to home. I started in 2016 out of high school, graduated from E County. Tried college for a little bit. It wasn't for me, and I have about 40 years of generational experience in real estate, and it's kind of in my blood. I grew up showing houses with my mom, and one day I just kind of decided that's what I wanted to do, and I'm glad I took that leap, and I haven't looked back since. We ended up opening Cedar Hill in 2019, so it's our 5th year now, actually 5 years on the 31st when we decided to launch the podcast, actually. So, that's a good sign. But, we love Cedar Hill, and we try to give our best to, our clients each and every day. And we hope to do the same on the podcast. Our goals are to bring you knowledgeable experience on market trends and different tips and tricks to the trades. We're going to have guest speakers on the show, even as soon as our next episode, actually, which we'll mention later. And then we actually offer weekly ads and stuff like that that you can get and be a part of if you want to just hit our emails below, and we'll get you linked in and get you up on the air.
Yeah, so what we're trying to do with this podcast is really help anybody who's in the market to buy or sell, whether you're new or experienced. We want to go over topics that really help you understand the market, understand real estate in general, and really just help with you in the buying process and the listing process. That way it's simple. You know how we do what we do. And that's why today we're going to go over CMA and determining value. This is kind of where you start if you're going to go list your home. You want to know, what price to put it at, what's the market value, and whether or not, you're on the high end of that or the low end of that. And that's what we're going to do today with the CMA.
Yep, and CMA, obviously, it determines the value of your home. It's not an official appraisal, but it's our gather of the comps that have sold, recently in the area. So it's our professional advice what to list the home at. Obviously, we will go over later on different inspections and stuff that we could get pre-listing to make the transaction more smooth and seamless, and also have a more peace of mind for our sellers. But initially today, like you said, we offer CMAs free, no cost to our clients. It's something neat that we offer for our buyers and our sellers both. A lot of people think it's just kind of a listing presentation that we do to determine the value, but our buyers also need to know that the homes they're looking at are priced correctly. So we do use that approach when going to look at homes as well, especially if we're looking at quite a few. We want to determine what's the best value for our potential buyers.
And before we get into today's topic, I just want to say thank you to Collier Title, to Supreme Lending, Garrett Greenwell, and Chad Gooden. Also, for this week's sponsor, I want to thank Pike Electric for sponsoring this podcast. If you need any electrical work, heating and air, they're the people to go to. And shout out to Blue Moon Mercantile for making this sign for us. On a short notice, they were able to get it done, and we're pretty excited about it. But yeah, I guess it's about time to jump into the CMA. And
yeah, so what we're going to dive into is we're actually going to screencast, so you're not going to see our pretty faces for a little bit, but we're actually going to pull up the software that we use day in and day out to go over our CMAs. And actually, another good thing before we do hop into this about our company is we actually offer technically three different MLS boards. So we're a part of HCAR and also GLAR. So they are two separate boards for different areas in Kentucky. We have about 5 or 6 different realtor associations across Kentucky to provide the best searches, in that specific area. But luckily enough, we are a part of the Heart of Kentucky Association of Realtors, as well as the Greater Louisville Association of Realtors. So we have those two boards to put it on, which blast it within, probably half of the state, and as well as Southern Indiana Association of Realtors that our broker is a part of, that she can post on as well to get the most outreach.
Yeah, and these MLS boards, they capture most of the data for the real estate market. So when we're doing our CMAs or we're looking for a home for you, this is the perfect place for us to find all this data. It kind of keeps it all in one place, and it really helps us with the CMAs because it has more information than, let's say, a Zillow would have. So it's a really good place to start for us when we're doing a CMA.
Mm-hmm. And also when we do list, it does post on those syndicated websites. So not only are you getting on the top 2 boards in the state, you're also getting on all those syndicated websites such as Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com, all those other websites that people are looking that doesn't have access to the MLS system.
Right.
But yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. So we're going to screencast on here and dive into the CMA. So essentially, you would have your subject property if you were to call us and list. So we're going to do one of our current listings that we have at 55 Marie Lane. We're going to type in the subject property here and click continue. You can put that or your person's information. And then if you want to put your client's information there, you can as well. And then we'll go to comparables. Oh, we've already used that one, it says. Okay, so, and right here, when you go to subject property, if this property was already listed on the MLS, or if you were going to be inputting one on the MLS, you could pull that subject property and put it right there. It's just a cleaner look for your clients. I recommend doing that if you were to pull up a CMA. And then we'll go in here and add the comparables. And since this is not just land, obviously you see that we have different ways that we could look up for the CMA, but this one is land and a home, so we're going to do residential and farm. And so where we start out is we're going to go to all sold, and then so typically we'll go back about, I guess, 6 months in most cases. But with the market being fluctuating as much as it has on this specific one, it's hard to find comparables. So I'm going to actually go back a year and then try and take the best comps, that we can get from there. And then it's located in Brandenburg, so we're going to use that as the city. You don't really want to go too big of a radius. Obviously, you can touch on that subject. But, in the more rural areas like us, we're going to do more just the cities. And then, obviously in like a bigger city, you would do just a mile radius or so.
Right. You want to stick to the closest area that you can get. So for our area, since it's so rural, we can just do Brandenburg. Sometimes you could even do just Meade County. But if we were to go up to Louisville, the prices just fluctuate so much in between neighborhoods that you want to make that radius a little bit smaller. But in our case, we could just go ahead and select the city of Brandenburg, and that should be good enough.
And so on here, obviously we selected Brandenburg. And in most cases, you don't want to use homes that have a lot of acreage if your home doesn't have a lot of acreage, because you're going to have to be using per acreage approach, which we will discuss later, which if we do not have enough subject properties to compare to, we might have to use that approach down the road. But we'll put max 5 acres because this subject property only has about 2.5. And then we'll go down to total finished living space. So this home is a 3-bed, 2-bath. It's got about 1,600 square foot above ground square footage, and then the basement is unfinished, but it's got about 1,200 square footage of unfinished living space. So for the finished living space, we're just going to put 17, we'll put 2,000 max, because you don't want to go right on the money. You want to see kind of a wider range of comparables. So I usually typically go about 300 over the square footage and a minimum of 300 below the square footage to get the best of both ranges. So I'll do a range between 1,300 and 2,000 square foot on the total finished living space. And then we'll go down here. We have a basement added. And as you can see, we have 6 comparable properties already right there. So we're going to hit the search button and we're going to see what pulls up here. Okay, and we'll go full screen for you guys. So as you can see, we have these 6 different subject properties ranging from $215,000 to $339,000. Okay, and what we could do, since they're all pretty evenly comparable, we could just add all these and get an average of all those, and say that's going to be our list price. But if we want to dive in deeper, we're going to go over here and look at the above ground square footage the total basement square footage, and then the total finished square footage. So we have, the most accurate comps that we can get.
Right.
And what we're looking at right here, nothing is spot on the money. And then also, once we're looking and we get the CMA presented, we'll want to look at these days on market, because obviously if they've been sitting a little bit, they was priced a little higher, something was wrong with them. We can go ahead and take away from that. So we're going to go ahead, like I said, just for the sake of time, we're going to click all 6 of these. And like, if you want us to dive deeper into this personally for one of your properties, we can definitely do that for you guys as well. And then we'll go down here and add to CMA, selected properties, because sometimes you'll have more than, what you just selected. And then, so that's all your comparable properties right there. And we'll go down to page layout, and you can put in some extra stuff if you want to, but I typically just go down to the presentation setup. We'll put the cover page, we'll do the agent resume, and if you want to put your company info right here, you can, but we're all independent contractors, so we like to self-brand as well as company brand. So, and I typically like to do the comparable report on the horizontal style rather than the vertical, just because I think it's a cleaner look for our clients.
It's a better look.
And so down here, you also have these different options that you can add into your summary or to your CMA. I add in the summary because that just kind of gives you a good box of all the prices rather than looking at each individual property. And you can do your seller's net sheet, kind of determine the profit that they're going to make. And then you're also going to be able to do different things like selling versus timing and stuff like that. So we're going to go down here and we're going to view presentation, and we're going to start the CMA, and it's going to generate that for us, and we're going to show you guys how it looks once we get it all formatted for you guys. And so you can mess with these cover pages. Typically, if you were to have their subject property uploaded, you would have the picture of it right here, and it would give the information down here as well as who had prepared it, the realtor that did it for you guys. And then obviously your agent resume, it'll tell you a little bit about you and your best qualities, because you want to sell yourself as well. And then it'll come down to the comparable report, and each subject property will have the information that you need on there as far as price per square foot and things like that, days on market, and when it was listed and closed. So it's a bunch of helpful information.
And as we mentioned before, these CMAs are free. If you're coming to us and you want to figure out a value of your home, this is a service that we do for free. And Jalen, how long does it take for you to get one of these out if a client texts you in the morning and they want to get a CMA?
Typically for a CMA, we can have it out same day. I would say give us a couple hours. Obviously, when we first run the CMA, we're going to pull the PVA on the property, and then we're going to as well, pull our comps. But until you actually lay eyes in person on the house, you don't know what kind of shape it's in, if it's dated or outdated. So This is good to kind of give them the highs and lows in the summary of the report. You can kind of give them a high price if it's fixed up, a low price if it's kind of dated, and then an average list price is what I typically go off. And on this actual home, we have it listed at $299. I think that the $299 mark is actually pretty fair for the home, for the market. The interest rates are dropping a little bit, but right here it says the $289. And like I said, what would you recommend people do as far as list price? Would you do above or below market value?
So I always recommend you want to go for either market value or below market value, because otherwise you're going to end up, potentially on the market for longer than you'd like to. If you're higher than the market value, more often than not, it's going to sit on the market, and that ends up looking bad on the property in general, even if there's nothing wrong with the property. So I always recommend to my clients, you want to list right at market value or just below to kind of drum up some more attention on the property. And hopefully get more showings out of it and get it to the closing table a little bit quicker. Right,
I agree. I always typically like to list at or below market value. In that case, like I said, I think market value, in my opinion, was about $10,000 over with those comps where, like I said, that wasn't the most accurate CMA I could do. I just kind of wanted to give y'all a visualization on how we go about it and show that it's not just us picking a number out of our brain and giving it to you guys.
Right, and the CMAs, one thing they don't take into account, like you said, is condition of the home. So it's kind of just the first step to get you a really good estimate. To kind of narrow it down a little bit more, we're going to do a little bit more research and digging, and also go view the property to see if it's been updated, see if it has new floors and stuff like that. and that will help us kind of narrow in that price a little bit better.
I agree. And like we said, you want to take into account price per square foot and acreage as well, price per acre. And sometimes if you weren't able to find a comparable property, that might have to be the cost approach you use. So say you find a similar house, but one house has 10 acres and one only has 1 acre. Obviously, in Meade County, price per acre is going anywhere from 20 to 50,000 an acre. So that price can vary quite a bit just because of the acreage. So then you'll take price per acre, which is, say for an acre 20,000, and then say the house is about worth 250 to 300,000. So you're going to take the price of the home, add in the price per acre, and get your value.
I recently ran into something similar to that, where I had a brand new build home sitting on about 6 acres in Brandenburg, which in city limits that's pretty rare to find. So it was kind of hard to find comps that would fit that. So what I did instead, like you said, was comped the house itself, and then also added in the price per acreage, and that's where we come up with a property like that.
And another thing that we like to look at is, pre-listing inspections and pre-appraisals, like we were discussing earlier at the beginning of the show. Why do you think it's good to get a pre-listing inspection?
Pre-list inspection is good for you for a couple of reasons. One is peace of mind, and also knowing what to expect. So getting a pre-list inspection is going to give you kind of a report where you're going to have the breakdown of what's wrong with your house, the ins and outs of it. So, when a buyer comes along, they do their inspection. If they're coming up with a repair request, you're not really surprised by it. It can also give you some hints on what you should maybe fix before you go ahead and list. And also it's going to maybe save you some time if the buyer is okay with your inspection, to kind of move the deal along a little bit quicker, because a lot of these inspections can be, a week to 2 weeks out for scheduling.
In the contracts they'll put, me typically, because I want to get the process moving along and I know we can get inspections scheduled quickly. I usually put about 5 days for the inspections and then a 2-day for the repair request to be negotiated, which only takes about 7 days out of the contract, which is 7 days more than we should be held up. But at the same time, you have agents putting in 14 days for inspections and 5 days for negotiations, and that takes 20 days out of what you expect to be a 30 to 45 day closing,
Right. Yeah, I really recommend the pre-list inspection if you're kind of in the market for it. It's just going to help you out ultimately. And I think it's just something that I've done before, probably something you've done before, and it's always worked out for the better, I think.
And a home inspection will make or break a deal. I mean, when you get a home inspection, and it's alarming, it is, especially for first-time home buyers, you get a 50 to 100 page report, and everything's in yellow or red, and you're like, oh my goodness, there's so much wrong with this home. But in reality, there's even going to be stuff you find wrong on a new construction home. So don't be dismayed about what you may find on a home that's been lived in but well cared for. Stuff goes out of style and stuff like that. So
yeah, and what do you recommend on what sellers should fix before listing, or what they should focus on before listing? Just kind of keep in mind, like, if you're going to list, there's a few things you should prioritize.
Yeah, I really think that paint is a big one. So that's the first thing that people are going to look at is your walls. That's it's eye level. It's the whole house for the most part. So and a lot of buyers are going to come in and paint when they buy the house anyways, even if it's a good color. They just want to put their own touches on things. So just put a neutral, good base coat on there, and make sure your trim looks all good and uniform. And that's the two main things I think people look at, and making sure your ceilings and walls are trimmed out neatly. And
right,
I would, if you're a good painter, have at it. But I think it pays to have a professional painter come in. That paint goes a long way. And then I think flooring as well is a big one that people kind of steer past. Yeah, they can offer a flooring allowance, but I mean, you see a little rise in a floor and they're like, oh no, what happened here? And even as so much as having the temperature off for a couple weeks during the transition of seasons can cause the warping in the boards. So
right,
a lot of buyers are unaware of common home maintenance, and it scares them, especially for first timers.
Another one too, I think, is fixtures. They're relatively cheap, and I think they go a long way in kind of adding a new light to your house. They kind of set the tone. They're pretty cheap to get into, and I think they're easy to put in. Flooring, paint, and fixtures, I think, are a good place to start. So what do you think adds value to your house versus what you need to fix?
So obviously adding value, I think, would be, like you said, fixtures and stuff like that, painting. I would add appliances. Appliances are a big one. I'd put you some new appliances in a home that you're selling, or as long as they look nice. Stainless steel is typically what most people are looking for nowadays. And then, like I said, flooring adds a tremendous, change of character in a home. You really don't notice. We do a lot of flips. I'm an investor as well as a realtor, so when we're flipping these homes, it don't look like it's even changed at all from when we demoed it till we put those floors in. The painting helps, but really the flooring ties the whole home together, and I think a lot of people, like I said, steer past that.
And with appliances too, I know as an investor, you can actually go to like Home Depot, Lowe's, and Menards. If you go early enough, they have scratch and dents.
You have to go early. Them investors get in there.
They're gone pretty quick. But these scratch and dents, they look brand new. And like they say, it's just a scratch or a dent, and you can get them for a super discounted price.
We got ours, actually. Sorry to interrupt, but we got ours for our house whenever we moved in there last year. We went up to Lowe's, and it was a $2,000 fridge. If we were to buy it brand new, we went up there early one morning, about 6 o'clock in the morning when they opened. And we got it for $500.
Yep.
And all it was just the GE logo was a little bit dented, so we got a fridge magnet, put it right over that bad boy.
And what do you think, to kind of transition, what do you think about curb appeal and the importance of that when you're going to list your home? And so maybe some little things you could do to help that.
I think curb appeal is a big thing. So there's some things that don't add value, like we were just discussing the things that do add value, but some things that don't add value that people think would is stuff like some swimming pools, fences, and things like that. It does add curb appeal, and a potential buyer might see that as a plus, but at the same time, it's not actually adding value to your home.
No.
But that curb appeal is a real thing. That's what's going to get people to get in there. And like with our pictures, we want to capture that curb appeal on the outside. So that's why we have the drone photography and stuff like that, so we can catch every angle, get every aspect of the home that they have to offer.
And the curb appeal kind of leads into first impressions. And that kind of leads me to making sure your house is clean and staged before you go to list.
Yeah, use a professional too, because people try and skimp out. And even me, I like to pride myself on being able to stage some homes, but even my mom and Tyler, our office manager here, they go restage some of them for me, because they got that touch, they got the eye, and it totally transformed the home. You leave them blank slate. We've had homes that the seller didn't want us to touch, so we ended up just leaving it bare. Sat for a month or two. We ended up staging it, took new pictures, took it off the market, brought it back as a new listing. It sold the next week. 2 days on the market after we relisted with the new staging. Yeah, and those cleaner too, like you'd mentioned.
Yeah, those decorations, staging the house really helps, especially if the house is empty. If there's not really anything in it, it's hard for people to kind of visualize what that house would look like if they were living in it. And so staging really kind of takes that to that step where they can visualize what it would look like with someone living in it. Without it, it just kind of looks bland, I guess, because you can't really see what it would look like with, furniture or.
And that's why we say you might want a professional stager to come in there as well, because yes, people don't want to see a blank home, but they don't want to see a cluttered home either. And it's hard. You got kids, just day-to-day life. You're working a 9 to 5. You don't have much time to come home and play and clean. So your house gets a mess, and then if you do got showings, you have to clean it almost every morning. You get a professional stager out there, limit your household items, box up, prepare for the move, because it's a quick closing, quick transaction, especially if you're using us. And get prepared, for what's to come.
Right. Do you have any other tips or kind of pointers for sellers on what to expect?
As far as tips go, do your research on a realtor. Obviously we would like you to use us. We're partial, but you want to do your research, see who can offer you the best, commission, who can offer you the best service, and I say commission, but don't let it be discounted, because we obviously are going to hook up return clients and investors, because they're obviously loyal, but you're gonna get what you pay for, and if you're just looking to save money, it's just like with anything else, you're not gonna get the job that you deserve.
And really try to avoid contacting multiple realtors. It just kind of gets messy.
Yeah.
So do your research first. Find a realtor that fits you.
Because be loyal.
Yeah, be loyal, because it does kind of get into a headache between different realtors and for yourself ultimately. So find a realtor that's good for you and stick with them, and hopefully they can help you in any way that they can.
Yeah, I agree. And I was just looking, I didn't even realize we had a few comments. We want to give a shout out to Caitlin Rhodes. She wants to know how to buy a house. We'll start on that subject, start to end for you while we're here, and then we'll get back into this episode. We just wanted to kind of let you know that it is okay to give us a Q&A while we're live on the air. We got an episode and we got it broke down how we want to go about it, but we do want to allow time to go over and interact with our viewers and answer questions that you might have, at that moment, because even us, we're forgetful. We'll forget about things, once we hang up the phone or go off the air, So go ahead and ask us some questions if you want to, and we'll go ahead and answer Caitlin's question on how to buy a home.
So first step, in my opinion, is talking to a lender, trying to get a pre-approval and see where you're at on your budget. That really helps our realtor. It helps you too to kind of narrow down your search. You don't want to be looking at $300,000 homes. If you're approved for 200, you might be wasting your time. So I'd say first step, go ahead and talk to a lender, get your pre-approval. And if you want to talk to your realtor first and kind of get an idea of some recommendations, I would recommend that as well. But yeah, I'd say that's the first step. What do you think comes next after that?
Definitely finding your lender, getting that approval, and then really after you get that approval, they're going to approve you for whatever amount that you physically can buy and be comfortable with. But you have to know what you're comfortable spending, and obviously you don't want to be house poor and just living paycheck to paycheck to provide a house over your head if you can help it. So I would recommend, budgeting, finding a monthly payment that works for you. And you also want to ask your lenders, you want to ask about the PMI and the stuff that might be wrapped into your loan and your monthly payment as well, because, what you're actually paying is not just your mortgage. You also have your interest that's added in, and then you have your mortgage insurance a lot of time, and then as well as property taxes a lot of time can be escrowed as well.
And also think about, before you buy, where you want to be, how long you think you're planning on living at this place, and really set up an idea of what kind of home you want to be in. This really helps you narrow down your search and find the right home. So just keep in mind of what you want out of a house, and that'll really go a long way.
And your realtor should be able to take the few keywords that you say and be able to provide you with a good list. And then, the next step would be to start looking at those homes with your preferred realtor. And you would look at a few, hopefully a couple a day. I know some clients out of town might have to look at quite a few, squeeze them in. I recommend about max 3 to 4 a day, because you start looking at any more than that, you're going to start getting confused and not remembering the key points in the house. And that's a big investment. You don't want to start mixing houses together, forgetting what one has to offer than the other.
Right. They kind of get cluttered together once you're viewing so many back to back to back. But it's good to view multiple in a day, I think, too, because you want a comparison. You might see a house that you really love, but then you go to the next house and you like it even better. So I definitely recommend viewing more than one. That really helps. So,
and we actually have another question from Caitlin. She asked if we had any pet-friendly rentals, and we actually do offer pet-friendly rentals. Obviously, I'm not an attorney, so you'll have to talk to one of those if you want to know law by law on your lease. But depending on your landlord and what options they want to go, we do have pet-friendly rentals. Typically, they will require a deposit per pet, but it really depends who owns the property and what they're willing to offer.
So how many rentals do we have available right now?
I think we have so many coming in and out. I think we manage upwards to 60 to 70 rentals currently. But I think right now we have 2 or 3 currently available. I know one's down in Battletown. It's a 3-bed, 1-bath, stick-built home. It's in a country setting, beautiful little home. I can't remember the price on it, but you can call Cedar Hill Properties at 422-1331 and ask for Tyler, Jalen, or Josh, and we'll be able to get in touch with you with who you need to be in touch with.
Yep.
But what we're going to go over next as well, we're going to take a short intermission break, get our next topic all squared away, and give a thanks to our ad sponsors. We'll be back in about 2 minutes, but whenever we tune back in with you guys, we are going to go over buyer coverage or buyer leverage, seller leverage, different stuff in the offer that buyers and sellers might look over. So we're going to really break down the contracts that you'll be seeing whenever you invest in buy real estate, sell real estate in the state of Kentucky with us. Thank you guys, and we'll be right back. Jalen and Josh coming back at you. Thank you guys for holding with us while we went and printed off a few contracts. Should have been prepared beforehand. But we wanted to break down this next segment with you and go over a few of the different things that the contracts have to offer for listing, for buying. We're going to go over some seller's disclosures and things like that, different agency consent agreements, to just kind of show you guys what you might be looking at whenever it does come time to purchasing and selling some property. So we're going to start off with the exclusive right to sell. So essentially, this is your listing contract. It's going to be 3 pages in most cases, at least from the HCAR contracts. I'm sure the GLAR contracts are the same, aren't they?
Yeah, they're about 3 pages.
And basically that just goes over the property address in discussion and the list price and then the duration of the listing agreement. So it's all negotiable, as well as your commission. There's no set price on commission for any listing. And typically what I like to do, because I have confidence, if we list at market value or below, that we're going to sell it in 3 months. So I typically list at 3 months. I know other agents might do something differently.
I typically do 3 months.
Yep, and unless the seller requests longer, which I'm confident that we can get something sold in a timely manner. And then you'll also want to put in there if the appliances are going to stay and stuff like that, because if they don't stay, it's not a deal breaker, but I do always recommend just going ahead and having the appliances at least in the home whenever you do go to sell it. And then obviously if you got gas and things like that, you want to make sure that those things are leased or owned, and make sure that you can get the cable and stuff that you want out there as well. And anything else that I'm missing on the listing contracts? It's just basically, you're listing a home for a few months.
Pretty straightforward, honestly.
You really start diving into it, on the listing contracts, on the seller's disclosure. You pretty much fly through the listing contract, and then you get to the seller's disclosure. You want to tell them a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the seller's disclosure is just basically breaking down everything that you know about the property. It's going to go over things like how long have you lived in the house? Has it been a rental? Is it vacant? It's going to go over your systems like plumbing and electrical, your HVAC system, your water heater. It's going to ask for the age of those systems. It's going to go into your roof, if you know anything about that, when it was installed, if there's been any leaks. And what this does really is it helps the buyer kind of understand the property, understand if there's anything wrong with it that they might be concerned about. But it's pretty standard that we do these every time, and we put them on the MLS. So when a buyer goes to look at a property, and if they're interested, they can get this list and kind of break it down and see if there's anything, like I said, is concerning to them. These are typically run about 5 pages. And like I said, they go over just the ins and outs of the property, lead-based paint.
Anything wrong with the property, that's
right
where you'll put it. And if you don't disclose that information on the seller's disclosure, it could potentially come back and get you. So you always want to be truthful, tell everything that you know about the property. You shouldn't have anything to hide. We all want to be honest people and, just buy and sell as good as we can. So I think that's another useful document that people will see that kind of catches them off guard, because they want us to fill it out for them, and that's not actually a form. I mean, there is a spot where we can fill it out for them, but I think it's best whenever the sellers fill it out themselves.
Yeah, I agree.
They can tell us what they want, but
you never know.
They need to take care of that. And then we'll move on to the buyer document. So this is probably the most lengthy one you'll see out of all the documents as far as the realtor transactions go on our end. You'll see quite a few documents on the lending side, and on the closing table whenever you go to sign, you'll need to go ahead and get your warm-ups in. But the HCAR contracts are 7 pages. The GLARs, is it 7?
Yeah, they're 7.
Yep, so they're both 7, and these are going to basically break down basically the listing agent, the selling agent, the price of the home, the purchase property, and things like that, what type of loan you're using. And then on the second page, you'll go over closing cost. If you're asking the seller to pay any of the buyer closing cost, you go over on the close date and stuff like that. And this is actually where we might jump into where buyers and sellers can actually use some leverage in their offers that they might not know about. So whenever asking for closing costs, in government funded loans, a lot of times too, they'll ask for the seller to pay for them. And a lot of times the buyer doesn't want to be out of pocket coming to closing as much as humanly possible when buying a home. So they're going to ask for closing costs, and you can actually use those in leverage to, potentially get a higher price for your home. Obviously when you're listing a home, list price versus offer price, you're listing at X amount of dollars versus offer price is going to be this amount. So say you list a home for $300,000, you have a buyer coming at you, what he thinks is full priced offer at $300,000, $10,000 in concessions, a $60 termite, and a $600 home warranty. Really, he's offering you about $289, instead of that $300,000 because of his almost $11,000 in concessions. So to counteract that, the seller might counter at $311,000 to make that profit, that $300,000 they're really trying to net. But in that case, you might have to worry about the appraised value in that case.
Right. You got to keep that in mind with your appraised value. You don't want to go too far over what the market value is, because you might run into that appraisal coming in short, which might require you to relist or maybe just drop your price in general. Another thing that this contract goes over is financing type. And back to buyer and seller leverage, it's actually, pretty attractive to a seller to get like a cash deal with a 2-week closing and no inspections. So
always everyone's dream.
Right. That's another thing to think about is, these different offer types. With FHA loan, you're probably going to be asking for concessions. And then, leverage that with a cash offer. The seller might be willing to take that cash offer just for the ease of the closing, the quickness of the closing, and not having those concessions to pay.
And the debt to income is something that a lot of people don't think of, I think, a lot whenever applying for a loan. So,
right.
And most of those down payment assistant loans, you're going to have a debt to income of at least like 48 to 52. So that means you're going to have about 52% of open income and only 48% of debt, at max. And then a lot of people think that, credit cards and student debt and stuff like that might not have no impact, but you really just want to make sure that you're, paying your stuff, getting your credit up and paying everything on time. It really goes to show
right.
and help you in the loan process and in the buying process as a whole.
Right, and that's why I recommend first step, speak to a lender, because you'll figure these things out. If you have any questions about your financing, just ask your lender, and they'll be able to help you with it.
And another thing on here that people, like you said, with the loan type, so you got 5 or 6 different loan types, which one of our title sponsors, Chad and Garrett with Supreme Lending, they will be on the show here in a few weeks. I think the 19th they're coming in, and they're going to discuss all the loan programs they have to offer and kind of break down each individual loan and go over that with you guys so you're a little more knowledgeable on that process as well. We can tell you all we know, and that we work together hand in hand quite often, but they're the professionals in that respected field, as well as us, so in ours. So I think we just we'll let them kind of dive in on that episode on those different loan types. But I do think that we can use those different loan types as leverage for the buyer and the seller, and those closing costs will come into play as well. But then another thing on these buyer contracts you're going to have to look at, if people are going through a local bank, some will have an in-house appraisal, so it's more an estimated value rather than an actual official appraisal. So that's another benefit you could look at from a seller and a buyer standpoint. That always makes the transaction go a little smoother, but at the same time, you're going to have to bring more money down. And obviously, like we said, with those government-funded loans, sometimes we can get you approved and closed with zero money out of your pocket, and it's crazy to think you can buy a house with $0, but essentially we can make it happen for you guys. If you want to look into those loan programs, we can get you in touch with the correct people. You need a minimum of a 580 credit score. A lot of people are concerned about their credit scores, and they don't even know their credit score. So like we said, go get in touch with those people, see what it is, and see if they can point you in the right direction. And they do offer credit recovery programs as well. So if you're just shy of your approval, they'll put you on a program for like 3 to 6 months, and you'll have a turnaround to get approved within that time frame.
And that zero money down, we'll actually probably go into it a little bit more next week too, when we're talking about renting versus buying. So like you said, you could potentially get into a house for zero money down. I mean, that's, to me, sounds better than, sometimes in some scenarios than renting.
Rent, you're going to have to bring a lot of cases, first month's rent,
pet deposit,
which is also first month or last month's rent. And then on top of that, last month's rent, and then pet deposits or any other deposits you may have.
Right.
So yeah, we will definitely dive into that next week. But then another thing on the contracts we'll go over is home warranty. So that's another negotiation factor. Home warranties can range anywhere between $500 to about $1,000, depending on what structure you want. And you can have the seller pay for it, or you can pay for it yourself. It's a negotiating factor. I don't know if I do or don't recommend it personally. I've had them work in the benefit of my buyers, and then sometimes the cost for the deductible is more than what electrician or someone would charge to come and fix it.
What does a home warranty cover?
So it depends on the type of home warranty, and we actually in our office and to buyers will bring a package with us from typically Home Warranty Inc. is who I like to use, but we're open to whoever the buyers prefer. But it has a pamphlet that shows everything that's covered on the report, and you typically want a home inspection because you'll send that in, and that'll kind of be their basis for everything in the home that they do cover.
Right.
And then obviously you'll want a termite inspection, which with VA the seller has to pay, so that kind of gets confusing for some people too, I think, as well.
Yeah. The VA, they require the seller to pay that termite inspection, but it usually only runs about $60, so it's really not a big sweat, but it definitely helps, I think, just to know whether or not you got termites, and for a VA it's required. So.
And then another thing on there would be the home inspection. So like we went over earlier, you might want to get that pre-listing inspection, because we always recommend for the buyer, if there's not been a home inspection on the home within the last couple of years, that you want to see one, because obviously there's some things that could not be seeable to the naked eye, and you want an inspector to get in there. And they're not, the appraiser, most appraisers will do a head and shoulder in the attic, a head and shoulder in the crawl space, but inspector, they're going to get in and inspect every inch
board
of this house. Yeah, every board, every wire, every piece of insulation. It's not going to go untouched or unnoticed.
And the next part in this contract we're going over is inspections. So the timing from the time you get under contract till the inspection, I think we typically run around 14 days is what we go for, with a couple days for repair requests to be put in.
That's where we mentioned earlier, a lot of agents do the 14 days. We try to do the 7. I personally do quicker. Anyways. Yeah, keep it a little quicker. And you should be able to get inspections in within 5 to 10 days, in my opinion.
Yeah, a lot of the inspectors, they usually sometimes can even schedule next day, which is really nice, because then you get that report within about 48 hours of actually scheduling it. And
then sometimes, God forbid, you don't want the contract to fall through, but the home inspection could be a factor that plays in the contract falling through. So you definitely want to be prepared when those come in, and don't get caught off guard.
Yeah.
And that is another negotiating factor too for buyers and sellers. So if you do get a repair request, you basically have about 3 or 4 options. You can just call her quits, let the deal fall through. You can accept that there's repairs to be done for the house as well. You could do money in lieu repairs, or you could take off the contract price. The list goes on, but that's another negotiating factor that sellers look at it and are like, obviously it's not the seller's dream to have a repair request list, but at the end of the day, there's going to be things that are wrong with the home, and if you take care of your home, it usually prevents those things being found. But at the same time, people do want to list as is too.
They still come up, but yeah, listing as is, that's a different story. At that point, they're not looking to make any repairs, so that's kind of out of the question.
Mm-hmm. And so another thing in the contract we can go over is that the possession is negotiable. So a lot of times I never recommend early or late possession to buyers or sellers at all. I like it to be a simultaneous closing. We want to hand you the keys as soon as we sign these papers and get the checks handed to everyone.
Right.
We don't want to wait 20 days before or move in early. It just causes too much risk, in my opinion. And like I said, contracts can fall through. I had one fall through. I hate to say it, but it fell through a couple weeks ago, 2 hours before closing, out of nowhere, And it was pretty tough, because I've been working with the guy for about 3 years, and he really liked the house. We had met electricians over there and everything, and he knew what was wrong with it. Ended up backing out, and there's not much you can do. If the sellers want to contact an attorney, they can, but at that point, that's out of my hands.
Right. I just had one back out. I had a closing coming up Monday. I ended up backing out. It was actually a cash deal, so they didn't even have inspections. So there wasn't necessarily anything wrong with the house. They just decided it wasn't the one.
Did they have it as is?
Yeah, it was sold as is.
So how did you negotiate them backing out on that?
They said they had spoke to, I guess, a neighbor, and they just weren't happy with the house. I'm not sure. And, I told my client, you can chase it, but,
right.
Ultimately you can't force someone to buy it, and is it really worth, chasing it?
Right.
So I just left that up to my seller and just kind of advised them on, where to reach out if that's something he wanted to do.
Yeah, worst comes to worst, at least he provided the professional example that he could and, gave him all his options. So you did good there, it sounds like. And that is stuff that you have to deal with, as good as we, think we are, and as good as we are good realtors, I like to think. There are times where you just can't help but things fall apart, but right. Just like the old saying goes, I guess, one thing falls apart for another thing to come together. So,
which luckily enough, he ended up getting his earnest money from the buyer, just
which
because
helps. It does.
Helps a little bit, but we're gonna have to be putting it back on the market here soon. So
stay tuned for that one for sure. And then another thing on the contract, you'll do a final walkthrough. So typically between 3 days to 1 day before closing, you'll do a final walkthrough. Mainly for if you do have those repair requests, you can make sure all the repairs were finished and done correctly, but also just to make sure that they haven't damaged the place and that it's actually in clean order as it should be according to contract.
Right. I like to look at it day of or day before closing, just to check everything out and make sure nothing's changed from the time that they've seen it to the time repairs were done to closing. Definitely something that you should do.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, and then the other stuff goes over talking about attorney stuff because, again, we're not attorneys. We can't tell you anything what to do. But another leverage source on here is your deadline, so your offer deadlines. So a lot of people will put in, which on the MLS you can require a 24-hour response time, which is probably typical across the board what people will put in. But for me personally, I like to put in a quick response time. It might have bit me a few times, but I think it's worked more times than not. A lot of people will allow more time for more buyers to get in those properties. But typically when I'm showing it, I see the houses immediately, so we're going in the competitive timeline, so we need to jump on them and have that quick response.
And as a buyer, that puts pressure on the seller to kind of make a decision at that point and not leave you hanging.
Yep, I agree. And that's a very useful tool, and that's when you can go on to counter. And we've countered, so it gives you 4 options to counter on the 7th page. We've went on to multiple blank addendums, one after another. I mean, it really takes. So let's dive into our few questions that we've had since we've been going over a few topics we had today. Again, we want to thank you guys for tuning in. It's been a blast so far. We're nearing the end of this podcast, but we do at every end of the podcast want to do at least a Q&A if we haven't gotten to all of them so far, and just kind of go over what questions you may have for us. And as you watch this video in the future, as it's published post-production, I hope that you comment. So for our next week podcast, we have a few questions to go over firsthand before we jump into that week's topic.
Right, and if there's questions that we can't cover, or we get a bigger list of them, we might even just do an episode of Q&As and kind of go over everybody's questions.
I wouldn't mind that. Maybe like a once a month Q&A or something.
Right.
Just to kind of go over what they're doing, or maybe quarterly. We'll see how it goes. But let's start off with Caitlin Rhodes. How long have you all been together? So we've been together, I guess, like you said, when did you start?
About 3 years.
3 years ago. So he started, which we went to school together, and our fathers, they worked together actually in the union. So we always heard a lot about each other, and I always thought he was kind of cool, but I thought he might have been too cool for me, so I never really reached out to him. And then I think we had strength, senior year or junior year, something like that together.
Yep.
And we talked a little bit, our dads were still working together, so he's like, that's kind of cool. He seemed like a nice guy. And then,
my dad would always be like, hey, you know Jalen?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a class.
Yeah. And then his, actually, Pike Electric, this week's ad is his brother-in-law, Joseph Pike. He was a family friend of ours, too, mutual friend. And he ended up coming over for Halloween one year. We had a Halloween party, and we invited Josh once he started working, and we hung out then, and we was hooked. We was like, why didn't we do this sooner?
Yep.
And then we've been business partners, for the later part of a year or so now, huh?
Hey, and now we're starting a podcast.
Yep. We work
good.
well together, and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Yep, me too.
And then Danny Rhodes, thank you for tuning in. He's got is it a good time to buy or to sell my house? How is the market currently?
I think it's a great time.
It's always a good time.
It's always a good time. But as rates are dropping, I think that it's really going to, in the new year especially, I think it's a great time to sell. Me personally, within these past 5 days of the new year, the amount of leads and calls that I've been getting have been a lot higher than the end of December.
It's definitely still a seller's market.
Right, it's still a seller's market, and prices are still good. So yeah, it's absolutely a good time to sell. And what do you think about the market?
I think the market's awesome. And a lot of people I tell, so they're worried about the interest rates, and I'm not going to go into detail, but before the interest rates were super low, I actually got a buddy I was out to dinner last night with, and he said, man, what's the lowest interest rate you ever seen? And I told him, he's like, mine's at a 2.7. And I was like, my eyes got big. I ain't heard that in a year or 2-3 years at least.
Right.
And he was like, what should I do? I was like, keep that. Don't you dare do anything but keep that. Whether it's a rental or whatever if you want to move. But, use the equity out of it, which is another topic we'll discuss in a later video, how to use your equity. But, I think that the market's good. It's a seller's market still, despite what they think. The interest rates are scaring people. And actually, what I was going to say was I had a client. He was approved, and he was approved for around $300,000. We was looking for about 6 months. It's tough to really ideal in on a house that you really want, especially for a first-time home buyer. And whenever we were looking, we couldn't find the right one. Well, he was like, let's wait. I was like, okay. Well, he had to get reapproved because only 90 days for his approval. Mm-hmm. And when he got approved 1 year later, that same monthly payment was all the way down to $189,000 for the same monthly payment because of the interest rate difference, Yeah. So, but at the same time, they were scared about the interest rate. Find you a house, whether obviously one you can afford, but date the rate, marry the house. Find you a house that you really like because interest rates, they always rise and fall, but the market with inflation, it's on a constant stair step up. It's never falling, so. And
you can always refinance, so keep that in mind. I'd say 2019, I think interest rates were around 3%, and now they're around 7?
Yeah, 7, 8. They just had the drop actually. I think the biggest drop since about 2019, I think is what they've mentioned, and there's hopefully a couple more drops over the year.
7.5, 8, around there. That seems kind of high, but if you look at the historical rates, it really isn't. It's not, too terribly high. I think 3% is going to be hard to get back to. That might be something that we might not see for a while.
That's what I've been telling a lot of people. Actually, I had this other closing a couple weeks ago, and they got approved right before the rate currently just dropped, and they was at about 7.5 to 8%. And I just locked in another VA loan for a 6.2 that same day that they closed, and they was like, "Oh my goodness, how much have the rates dropped?" And I was like, her husband's like, "Don't tell her." This was an hour before closing, and I was like, "Oh," and she's like, "Tell me," and I was like, "I just locked one in for 6.2." She's like, "Oh my goodness." I was like, well, good thing for you, she can refinance in 180 days. So 6 months from now, it might be a better interest rate than what she was approved for. So hopefully she can refinance for a lower rate, get her monthly payment down, and be a little more comfortable.
And from what I've heard, which obviously I'd speak to a lender, but a good time to think about refinancing is when it drops a half or a full percent. Is something to think about, is about when you should start gauging whether or not you should refinance.
Yep, and We're not professionals in the lending field, and we truly never know when the rates are going to go up or down, but we just have professional experience and as well as generational experience from family and friends and professionals in their respective fields that give us the insight to help us determine what we think that is going to lie in the future to come.
Right.
But we're, like we said, no professionals at all. But yes, we do think the market's currently stable. We think it's a great seller's market. And actually, so another thing was I was personally kind of thinking it was turning into a buyer's market because you'd see in our area, in our county specifically, about 60 homes for sale on average. And then it dropped to about 30 in that 2020 crisis, because it was a huge seller's market. We're back up to 60 on average, per week. But we're still... turning those homes quicker though than we were before, so it's still a seller's market.
Right.
We're just people are actually getting on the trend, so And then with those interest rates dropping, though, I think it's going to cause inflation. So people are waiting for the interest rates to drop, but the prices are going to go up. So essentially your monthly payment's going to go up if you do wait.
Right. And I think a lot of that's caused by in our area, by Nucor coming in, by the Ford plant coming in. We have a lot more people moving into the area. So that kind of increases the demand and lowers the supply. And in
our
return,
area especially, like
and,
you said, Nucor, the battery factory, and a lot of people don't know about the factory coming in Hardinsburg as well. Our area is coming and growing more than some of us would like, but we can't stop it. Let's get with it and let's get ahead of the curve, and that's why we're here to produce this informational podcast for you weekly, so we can give you the latest market trends locally. A lot of people probably think that we're trying to go more national level, but I personally, and I think Josh is with me, we want to hit the local market. We want to be able to give you local live information and produce common questions that you guys may have for us.
Let's see, we got any more questions?
No, I think we're good. So we want to thank you guys for episode 1 tuning in with us. We'll be back next week for renting versus buying and property management. We will have our guest speaker Tyler Carter on, and he will be going over property management aspect for us and giving you all the insight on that.
Yep.
And again, we want to thank our title sponsors as well as our weekly sponsors as well.
Yeah, thank you to Collier Title, Supreme Lending, and thank you to Pike Electric as well. Thanks for joining on to the team, and we hope to work with you more in the future.
Thank you guys, and y'all have a great day.